kind of like controlled chaos a little bit. You're balancing that fine line of being in complete control to, you want to go as fast as possible, and that means letting the sled run, letting gravity take its course. So you're constantly teetering on that line of being in complete control to being completely out of control, and that's when you're going to have your fastest runs.
This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine. Today, we're saying an official goodbye to winter by welcoming Julia Clukey to the show. Julia is an international star in the sport of luge. She's an Augusta, Maine native and a member of the 2010 Winter Olympic team. Since her long season and our long winter are finally over, we finally get a chance to sit down and learn the inside story of what it takes to win a race that is decided by thousandths of a second. Everything you ever wanted to know about luge is coming up. Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine is brought to you by Hammond Lumber, Dysarts, EBS, Doors Equipment, and Napa Auto Parts. Before we get started, a couple of other things you should know about Julia Clukey. She has partnered with the Maine Beer and Wine Distributors Association to help educate school kids about personal responsibility. And she's partnered with the Kennebec Valley YMCA to create a summer camp for girls. Julia Clukey isn't just world class, she's local class. So say hi to Julia Clukey.
Hi.
You're a world-class athlete in luge. This is the first time I've had anybody who is world-class at anything on the show. You have competed in national events and won them. You've been a competitor in world events and medaled. You've been in the Olympics.
Well, it's wonderful to be here. I'm proud of my accomplishments. I love what I do, so it's exciting for me. It's still exciting 17 years now later since I started my career.
You started young, too. Now, how did you get into this?
Very young. It was very random. The U.S. Luge team does a recruitment tour, and they travel around to different cities. And they came to Portland, Maine back in 1997. And a friend and I read about it in the paper, and the very bottom part of the ad was that we'd get a free T-shirt if we came out for the day. So like any 11-year-old kid, we loved getting free stuff. And it, piqued our interest enough to go and try this new sport that we hadn't even really, heard of before. I'd watched the Olympics but never paid too close attention to the sliding sports. So.
A young girl of 11 years old has to have somewhat of a fearless streak to say, hey, that looks like fun.
I think most kids do. We recruit kids ages 10 to 14, and I say now we recruit them at that age before they know better, what they're getting themselves into.
I just slid right by the fact you have won national events.
Yes.
You've won the U.S., what do you call them, national?
National championship.
And you have medaled in world events, at least two?
Yeah, 2 silver medals in World Cup competition.
And you competed in the Olympics.
I did in the 2010 Olympics, and I was the alternate for this past winter 2014 games.
Yeah, and you missed by how much?
13 thousandths of a second.
Oh, we're going to get back to that because that would drive me absolutely crazy. But let's start with the basic. What is luge?
So luge is a sliding sport. We go feet first, and it's basically if you envision a giant water slide that's been iced over. Sliders, we slide on our backs, feet first, and we reach speeds of upwards of 80 miles an hour. The track is just under a mile long, and a run usually takes us about 45 seconds to complete. So in addition to the speed, it's also a lot of high-pressure G-force in curves. So it's on TV, it looks like it's a little bit easier than it is to actually do, I'll say.
I got to say, on TV, it looks terrifying.
Yeah, the speeds look terrifying, but there's a lot of, pressure that sometimes doesn't come through on TV.
Yeah. Now, what is the history? Somebody at some point said, hey, you know what might be fun?
Yeah, it certainly originated from bobsled. Yeah. That sport's been around, for over 100 years as an Olympic event. And then from there came the skeleton, which is head first, and, my sport, luge, which is feet first. So it's just a development of that, taking the bobsled, which is a team sport, and creating an individual sport. But really, everyone goes sledding. It was taking the action of sledding and making it a little bit more professional and a little bit more, not honed in, I guess, but, building a course for it specifically and creating equipment that can handle the higher speeds.
At least bobsledders are somewhat enclosed.
Yeah.
Do the folks who compete in luge look at the bobsledders and think wimps?
Well, you never would say it out loud because they're usually about 240 pounds and come from track and field, so they're rock solid. But, the sports, we share the same track, but they are very different. The designs of the sleds are different. Luge is the most difficult of the three as far as a learning curve goes because of the shape of our runners. But, certainly bobsled and skeleton is luge's sister sports, and we like to support each other.
But even so, even the skeleton people who go head first must look at the luge people and say, wimps.
Yeah.
I mean, that looks insane to me.
So, yeah, that's the latest addition to the Olympics. Yeah. 2002 is when that sport came. What is the official term? Are you a luger, a lugist? We usually call ourselves sliders. We don't say we're going to luge today. We say we're going to go slide. We slide at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock or whatever it is. So that's the most common term that we use. That's the term you use amongst yourselves. Yeah. If I were to watch somebody on television refer to what you do, would they say slider or? They would say probably luging. Yeah, I would guess. Yeah. Now, when I attended Colby College back in the 70s, we used to steal trays out of the cafeteria and slide downhill in front of the chapel. Is that what it's like? It's somewhat like that. It's kind of like controlled chaos a little bit. You're balancing that fine line of being in complete control to, you want to go as fast as possible, and that means letting the sled run, letting gravity take its course. So you're constantly teetering on that line of being in complete control to being completely out of control, and that's when you're going to have your fastest runs. Yeah. I always thought I'd be good at a sport that involves lying on my back and trying not to move. Yeah. I'm guessing there's more to it than that. There is. I always say, when you see it on TV, it looks like we're just laying there. But in actuality, we're doing quite a few different movements down the track. Our sleds are designed to steer how we want them to steer as athletes. We spend a lot of time behind the scenes working on our equipment. So, the slightest motion of my body is going to, direct the sled left or right. Mm-hmm. So it's just a shifting your weight thing, or there's no change to the runner? Exactly. It's all done with your body. Your body is the steering wheel. There's a double suspension on the sled behind your shoulders and right around where your handles are. So you hold a pair of handles for minor steering. And so when you shift that weight, it flexes the sled, which, causes one runner to dig in or the other. Oh, okay. So how do you train for that? Well, right now is my off season. So most of my time is spent in the gym, working out, lifting weights, plyometrics. Core is really important. Like I said, we reach up to 5 G's of pressure. So that core is where all the movement comes from on the sled. So having that stability. So this is the more boring part, I guess. It's a lot of more fun in the wintertime to be sliding every day. But right now I train 6 days a week, between 3 and 4 hours a day, depending on, what my schedule is. Mm-hmm. What do you do on your 6th day, 7th day? Rest. Take a break, rest the body, mentally and physically. Yeah. When I watch you on TV, it looks like the strategy comes down to 2 things. A good fast start and don't buff the wall. Exactly. Yeah, the start's really important. So that's where the upper body strength, working out in the weight room. It's the only point where you're actually accelerating yourself. Once you lay down in the sled, everyone's traveling the same, course, the same drop as far as gravity goes. So we spend a lot of time in the summer getting strong, working on our technique on the start, and then the sliding portion of it. Obviously, the more important portion, but is that exactly? You want to keep the sled in the middle of the track, but also, to be fast, you have to minimize your steering, because if you steer the sled the entire way down the track, you're going to create more friction, which is going to slow you down. So it's finding that fine line of letting the sled run and then guiding it where necessary, through those bigger pressures. And that just comes with time and experience, learning, that you don't have to steer like crazy to get down the track, that the sled will, navigate a little bit on its own, and understanding your equipment and getting your equipment set up for you personally is also very important and can be a very tedious task. I would think so. I mean, by its very nature, steering means digging in a little bit, and that's infinitesimally slows you down. Exactly. Yeah. So, you don't want to overcorrect or oversteer. You want to, again, I keep going back, but, you're constantly in that line of being in complete control to being completely out of control, and that's when you're going to have your best runs, best times.
My guest is Julia Clukey. She's represented America on our Olympic team, earned medals in world competition, and won the U.S. Nationals in the sport of luge. So when you're on a tiny sled doing 80 miles an hour, what exactly does that feel like? Well, that's up next as Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine continues on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. My guest is Julia Clukey, one of the world's top competitors in the sport of luge. When I'm watching the Olympics on television, it looks like the competitors have been shot out of a cannon. They're doing over 80 miles per hour, going down a mountain on a sheet of ice. And that prompts a lot of questions. At that speed, does it feel more like smooth flying or more like sliding through a corrugated culvert?
It depends on the track.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Is there a lot of variation?
Yeah, ice conditions vary from track to track. So there's some tracks where it's really smooth and it's a great ride, and there are other tracks where it's really bumpy and it's not as enjoyable ride. It can be quite harsh on the body. So it's really just depends how the ice is prepared. And as an athlete, we're very analytical of our run. So we get down after a run, we immediately hop on two-way radios with our coaching staff that's watching various curves, and we talk about what they saw. And I write in my journal right away what the run felt like. So you're analyzing subconsciously the whole way down, so time really slows down. You never really feel like you're going as fast as you are because you're so focused on what you're doing and what you're trying to pay attention to.
Yeah, it'd be really good, I think, to focus on not dying.
Yeah. Crashes do happen. We're only about 5 inches off the ice on our sled, so it's a pretty low point of balance point, center of gravity. So when you do crash, it's usually pretty quick, just like a barrel roll, and you slide and come to a stop. In the history of the sport, there's only been one fatality in the course of 60 plus years now. So
when you do get a bumpy course and you're halfway down, do you ever say to yourself, "What the hell is wrong with this maintenance crew?"
No, you have to be gracious. It's not all the tracks are handmade, hand taken care of, and when it's minus 30 out, you got to cut the people a slack that they don't want to be out there scraping, at 7 a.m. in the morning. And those days you might just, take one less run than normal to save your body at this point where I am, to save my body.
I'm assuming every track is different and that it has its own twists and turns.
Exactly. Yep. Every track's uniquely different. There's certain components that every track has to have, so many left-hand corners, so many right-hand corners, but everyone's designed a little bit different. And, when I show up to a track for the first time for a year, I have a notebook that I keep all the tracks and all the lines, the general lines, and then, you tweak it from year to year depending how the ice is built. But year to year, the lines basically stay the same. You might have to steer a little firmer, a little less, depending on how the ice conditions are.
Yeah, so you're really thinking the whole way down. I'm coming into turn 4, I got to hit this line.
Yeah, you're really thinking about what it feels like. In training, I'm thinking about what does this run feel like right now? Do I feel the sled biting into the ice because that's slowing me down? Do I feel like I'm, transitioning well between curves? And then come race day, you really, you hopefully aren't thinking about too many of those things because you want to just clear your head and, we just say, let the sled run, let it go. But, in training, those sorts of things, how the sled feels underneath me, how my position feels, those are the things that I'm paying attention to because those are places in our sport where you can gain time and improve yourself.
Mm-hmm. Is there ever a time where you think to yourself on the track, I'm going too fast?
No, never happens. No, we always want more.
Now, I'm sure being aerodynamic is critical. Do you actually point your toes?
Oh, yeah, that's a big part of it. Our equipment does help a little bit. We have a special luge shoe that's, built pointed a little bit. But, that's part of my conditioning in the summertime is making sure my feet are flexible, so that I can point my toes and get that. It comes down.
Who knew? We race for so much.
We race for thousandths of a second, so you really have to be. There's so many little things you have to pay attention to make sure that you're, doing everything you can to succeed.
Ballet and luge, the only two places you have to practice pointing your toes. How do you see when you're lying there?
So a lot of it comes from feeling, actually. You take more from the feeling you feel with the sled underneath you. You can feel, when you're high in a curve, when you're low in a curve because of the way the pressure hits. But you do use a lot of peripheral vision. So when you're flat, you can see how close you are to the sidewalls. And then for curves, when you enter a curve and you're lying back flat, you can see the exit. So that, and you're kind of always thinking ahead because you're going 80 plus miles an hour. And if you're thinking about right then, right now, your chances are it's already too late. So you're already, looking ahead, thinking ahead.
Yeah, but you're not looking ahead to dinner.
So, no.
Just looking forward to the next corner.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, is the luge flat or is it custom fitted? What's the equipment look like?
It's custom fitted. It's a very technical sled. We spend, a lot of time in the summer and a lot of time every day prepping our sled. There's a lot of behind the scenes. We spend hours daily working on our sleds for a 45-second run the next morning. So it's the less glorious part of our sport. But The pod itself, the part that you lay in, is made out of fiberglass, and we have 3 or 4 different molds that the team uses, and then they're custom down to you individually, even more than that. So every person on my team, we all have our own sleds that fit us well, because that goes back to aerodynamics. You want it to fit you and your body. And then the runners are, they're a steel that we get from U.S. Steel. The where the runner's attached to, they're called the Kufins. Those come from Dow Chemicals. So we have some great suppliers within the United States that give us our materials. And then once we have the materials, we and myself and the coaching staff, we kind of put it together and work on it and get it, fine-tuned for myself as an athlete.
Do you get to do anything to the runners before you go? Heat them up, wax them down?
So you don't heat them up. We sand the runners daily to make sure there's no fine nicks in it, and then we polish them up to a diamond paste. It's like a really, the steels, when they start out, they look like steel, and then when we're done with them, they look like a mirror. You can see the color of your eyes in them. They're completely polished, because it's, again, we're going for thousandths of a second, and it makes about 0.2 different from unfinished steels to polished steels.
And 0.2 is huge.
It's everything, yeah. So we prep them daily, and then we also, from track to track, we'll change the shape of them slightly to give more steering or less steering, depending how demanding the track is that we're training on.
Do you have different luges for different conditions?
Not different sleds completely, but different runners. So I have 2 or 3 different sets of runners that I use intermittently throughout the season.
Has there been any changes in the sleds since you started your career in terms of materials?
Oh, yeah. We're always changing, always. Especially the postseason, once competitions are done for the year, I spent most of March in Lake Placid, and it was all equipment testing new things, seeing, we're always looking for another advantage, that extra half a tenth or a couple of hundredths of a second. So that comes with, testing new materials, testing new setups, things of that nature. So we're pretty... it's a very technical sport, and we spend a lot of our time and energy, on that side, because it is so important to stay competitive with the other large countries.
Who actually runs the sport? There must be some rules as to...
Yep. So we have an international governing body, and there are, rules for the sleds, like dimension-wise, material-wise, gaps, things of that nature, to try to level the playing field somewhat. So, for race days, we take this, before you go, they take the temperature of the steel, and they have to be within a couple degrees of the control temperature, which is basically the outdoor air temperature. Because if you have hot steels, you'll go faster. And then for every race, for Women's World Cup, 24 women qualify for the World Cup. And from that, 5 or 6 will get controlled, we call it. And it's completely random, and then they'll take you in and do a full check on your sled, full check on your body weight, things of that sort. And if anything's illegal, then you're immediately disqualified. So,
Julia Clukey is my guest. She's an Augusta native who got introduced to the sport of luge when she was just 11 years old. By the age of 13, she was competing and winning nationally. She joined the Olympic team in 2010 and slides all over the globe in World Cup competition. Generally, world-class athletes get world-class injuries. So how dangerous is luge? Stay right here with Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine. Saturday mornings at 9, Sunday mornings at 8 on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. On today's show, we're learning everything there is to know about the sport of luge, as told to us by Julia Clukey, Maine's Olympian in the sport. Julia has been competing internationally for 17 years in a sport that tears downhill in a tiny sled on a sheet of ice at over 80 miles per hour. Does a doctor ever look at your x-rays and say, oh my God, what happened to you?
They don't. Actually, surprisingly, luge, because of the slight vibration in sliding, we all have very strong bones. I'm serious. We've had like bone density tests, and we all have very dense bones, and they think it's from like the light vibrations of years of sliding. Yeah, because we start from a young age. There is the occasional injury. Most common is a broken ankle or broken foot because your feet are extended off past the sled. An occasional concussion. But this past year, we had one teammate, he broke a toe, but that was the only injury. And it really isn't that common because, again, we are only about 5 inches off the ice. So unlike skiing or riding a bike, you have a far way to tumble. It happens quick. And from a young age, you learn how to crash to keep, it's kind of like keeping everything tucked in the side the bus, and when it's coming. Usually there's like a split seconds of silence that you're probably not going to get it back under control, so you can brace for it a little bit.
How often does that actually happen?
This past year I crashed once, and it was my first crash in 3 years.
Oh.
So honestly, I wish I crashed a little more often, because every 3 years it was a little, it caught me off guard a little bit.
Get out
So
of practice.
it'd been so long, yeah. It doesn't feel great to crash, but 9 times out of 10, or even 99 times out of 100, you go right back up and take again. It's very rare that you have a hard crash that takes you out.
Yeah. There must be several occasions on the way down, at least on some runs, where you barely kept it under control. You almost lost it.
Yeah. That's, and that comes with experience too. You learn, how you can make those big saves. You certainly aren't going to have any results from it, but, you can stay, facing upwards at least. So,
what's a big save look like? I mean, you start to veer, hit the wall?
Yeah, sometimes usually if you're in a straight section and you start to hit walls, you'll drop your feet, which will balance out the sled a little bit. It creates like another point of contact on the ice. And then if you're in curves and get offline, once you feel yourself go up and come back down, the sled's going to climb again. So just, being ready and being active with your body, ready to steer the sled, you can save a lot that way. Mm-hmm. And that just comes from experience, knowing, when and how to steer.
At that speed, you're probably not going to yell a lot of things out loud, but are you thinking 4-letter words in your mind when things go out of control?
It happens so fast, but I just think you think sometimes like there's no chance it's coming, brace. But it's part of the game, especially we're constantly trying to push those boundaries with our equipment, make sure that we're set up to go as fast as possible. And sometimes you're testing new equipment and it can go horribly wrong, or have no control. You feel like you're on a sled that the sled's taking you down, you're not taking the sled down. And so then you immediately make adjustments and don't go up again until it's fixed.
Within your own team, do you ever try each other's sleds?
A little bit we do, yeah. We'll, in the preseason or postseason, if, just to see what someone else is riding, to see what it feels like. But more than anything, you just play with your own equipment. There's so much you can do with shaping the steel, shaping the angles. And, I've come from an engineering background, so I'm very analytical in that way. So I enjoy the process.
You made the Olympics in 2010, which was in Canada. Mm-hmm. Yep. Victoria?
Vancouver.
Yep. But you missed 2014 by 13 thousandths of a second.
I did.
That would drive me absolutely crazy.
Yeah, it was tough, especially such a small margin. But that's the name of our sport. I've won races or beat people out by those small margins too. And, really at the end of the day, I knew that I had done everything, that I could to put myself in the best position. And I just came up a little bit short. And, I had a slow start to the season and just was a little late to pick, just a day too late of getting back to my A game. So.
Now the winter lasts all year long in Maine. Does that give you a chance to train more?
It does. So I was actually in Lake Placid through the month of March sliding, and we were, sliding under track record conditions. The ice was phenomenal. It was very, very cold there as well. The track's still open. It's open through the end of April. So again, the long winter helps, but also we have artificial refrigeration. So it's easier to maintain our conditions. But I was ready to wrap the season up at the end of March. We start sliding October 1st, so it's a long season, and it is hard on your body. Your body, craves that break from the pressure and the sliding and the mental aspects.
So you do get to a point where you just don't want to do this anymore this year.
Yeah, and I reached it. So I had
Now, you train primarily in Lake Placid?
That's where our team's based out of. But I spend my off season in Maine. I try to get home to Maine whenever I can, and I stay here through the spring and summer. I like to train on my own. I don't have a issue. I don't need to be in the team atmosphere to keep myself motivated, especially after 17 years. I know what it is that I need to do to stay successful in the sport. So, I love being able to come home to my family and kind of get the break, away from the team a little bit, recharge my batteries and things of that nature. Because we're on the road October 1st through the middle of March, and you're living out of a bag in a small hotel room with a roommate. So
that sounds grueling.
Yeah.
There aren't many places in the Western Hemisphere that have luge tracks that I know of.
No, there's 2 tracks in the U.S., Lake Placid and Park City, Utah, and then 2 up in Canada, Calgary, Canada, and Vancouver. Then there's a lot of tracks in Europe, 4 in Germany, 1 in Austria, 1 in Norway, 1 in France, 1 in Latvia, 2 in Russia, and 1 in Italy. So most of our competitive season is spent in Europe. We usually every year have 1 World Cup in the U.S. and 1 World Cup in Canada. So we kind of consider Canada home turf because it's North America. So
I would think there are some European kids who don't take a bus to school. They ride the luge. I mean, to some extent, Americans are going to have difficulty getting into the sport at a world-class level.
Yeah. The Germans are the strongest in our sport, and the reason they are is because they have 4 competitive tracks that we race on at the World Cup level, and they have a handful of other smaller tracks that they use for club programs. They have, huge sporting clubs in Germany where the kids, after school, they try ski jumping and biathlon and luge and all the winter sports. And by the time they're 10, they've picked a sport that they're going to focus on. So, as far as the grassroots and development, it's hard for us to compete in that way. I think with the resources that we have, we do a pretty good job of getting the word out there and, through our recruitment tour, traveling to cities, trying to find kids that might enjoy it.
It must be a challenge to find them in America because there are so few places to do this.
Exactly, and that's the other challenge is not many parents want to let their kids go away for lengths of periods of time, and so we do have for our younger teams we have a tutor and academics, and their priority is there as well. In addition to the sliding and training.
I'm assuming this must be intensely competitive. Are there particular people that you like to beat, and are their names pronounceable?
I would say they're pronounceable for me because I've known them for so long, but there are some, like any foreign names, it can be difficult at first when you just see them on paper without understanding how their language pronounces them. For the most part, we're a smaller community as far as winter sports goes, and there's not a whole lot of turnover from year to year. Every 4 years there'll be some turnover. So for the most part, countries get along fairly well. I would say the country that most people don't like are the Germans. They're the best, but they're also,
aloof,
very cocky,
yeah.
And there's still some areas for improvement in our rules to make sure that the playing field stay levels. Our international federation is also based in Germany, so it can feel like a struggle sometimes. But
so when the run starts, are you thinking to yourself, I want the best run I can do today? Or are you thinking, I want to beat Gretel?
Every day when I show up, obviously, you're there to win, you want to win, but, what I can control is how well I do on the sled. And so really when it comes down to it, I'm thinking about, performing to the best of my ability and seeing where it puts me that day against the competition.
Julia Clukey is an Olympian and world-class competitor in the sport of luge. Augusta is now and always has been her home. In the off-season, she partners with the Maine Beer and Wine Distributors Association to educate school kids about responsibility and having the discipline to achieve your dreams. No international athlete stands on a medal podium without help from many people. It starts with family and community. Pay attention, there's a lesson here. That's next when Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine resumes on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. This is Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket with Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine. Julia Clukey is an Augusta, Maine native, an Olympic athlete and a World Cup medalist in the sport of luge. For competitors at that level, one thing is almost universally certain. They couldn't have gotten there without the support of family and community.
Yeah, that's very important. It certainly has been a huge significant factor for me. I started traveling internationally when I was 13, so my family gave up a lot. My parents gave up a lot, having their daughter gone for 4 months, out of the year from the time she's 13. I don't think parents really grow up thinking that's what they want. So I'm grateful to them that they let me, even at a young age, they believed in my dreams and let me go after them. It's the only reason I've been able to compete at the Olympic level. And, the community, when I was younger, I was, fundraising and trying to, because I wasn't a funded athlete until I was 17. So it's an expensive sport to get involved in as well. So, the community rallied behind me, supporting me financially. I was able to raise money to cover my expenses.
And you started at what? You said at 13?
Yeah, I started traveling internationally when I was 13. I tried out when I was 11, and then I spent a year on our development program just based out of Lake Placid, New York.
And then you started winning right away.
And then I had some early success. I was always really active as a kid, fairly athletic, took to things easily, and was like a good listener. So I picked up on it pretty quick, the combination of those skill sets that I already had.
Yeah, I would say when I think about parents who really make the ultimate sacrifice, it would be parents like yours, or it would be the hockey moms who have to get up at 3 a.m.
Yeah,
to take
for
their
the
kid
ice
to
time.
But in your case, there isn't a lot of places for ice time.
No, it's not. And that's the other thing, my parents or family, they'd come and watch me race, and they'd drive 6-7 hours to get to Lake Placid, New York for a 45-second run. And really, they're only seeing about 2 seconds of it as I zip by in one curve or another. So it's not the most spectator-friendly sport. I certainly think that at times they probably wish I had stuck with tennis or something like that. So.
And furthermore, when you were watching your kid play tennis, you're not thinking she could die out there.
Yeah.
Whereas you're going 80 miles down a mountain.
Yeah, I stopped telling my mom when I crashed a long time ago.
Now, do you have a role model, or did you have one as you were growing up?
Yeah. So both my parents, I would say, had heavy influence on me. My parents exposed me to a lot, which I'm grateful for, the arts and music and sports and from a very young age, I knew that I would never be limited as to what I wanted to do. And also from a young age, my dad really taught me that hard work was more important than anything. Like you had to be out there, tennis was one of my first sports. He taught me to play tennis when I was like 4 years old, and, we'd be out there hitting backhands. And I think through that, I learned that the only way to get better at something is to really just go out and do it, and you can't rely on luck or skill or anything. You have to be willing to put hard work in.
Yeah.
So both my parents, had that influence on me.
Yeah, discipline at a young age is so important.
Yeah.
I wish I'd had that.
Yeah.
I'm told that you have a special nephew, Lucas, that I should ask about.
Yeah. Lucas is 6 now. Mm-hmm. He's the son of my sister, passed away in 2010, and he's super important to my family. His father lives in Sanford, Maine, and we have a great relationship with them. We see him every weekend, every other weekend, and it's really important to my family to keep that connection to him. And he really is, the love of my life. I love spending time with him. He's so funny and witty, and he certainly has kept me grounded these past few years. And, I hope to pass on to him, through my drive for my sport, that he can do anything that he wants to do. And, through watching me train, watching me, having, it's not easy on him when I go away for 6 weeks at a time, but I hope when he's older, he understands why and understands that he can set, own his own big dreams and big goals.
Well, that theme has come up several times during our conversation here about how important family is, both as you're growing up and also support as an adult. Community is also important. You graduated from Coney High School, if I recall correctly.
I did, yes, in 2003.
Yes.
So.
So you have a whole community in Augusta. I think you still live in Augusta?
I do, yep. Yep.
So your home, when you're home, is right here.
It is, yes. Mm-hmm. I love coming home. Like I said, I was born and raised in Augusta. I think, growing up in Maine certainly also played a role in my success because, Maine is such a great state. There's so many opportunities out there for kids to be involved in different things. And when I was younger, the rec programs, community aspects, learning that sense of a community was really important to me. And I want to create the same sort of atmosphere for kids that I encounter now.
Now, you're about to turn 30, I think.
I am, yes.
Yeah, so
end of the month.
How long can you keep going on with the luge?
There is no set age. It's an experience-based sport as long as you can stay healthy and stay strong enough to compete. The last Olympics last year, the oldest competitor was 42 years old, and he won a silver medal. So, I'm not saying I'm going to do it that long, but it is an experience-based sport. And, right now, certainly I love what I'm doing. I'm, more determined than ever to get back to where I want, as far as placings in the World Cup. And, I'm ready to keep working hard. So I'm going to just ride that for as long as it does. When it stops being fun, I guess that's the first sign that it's time to move on. But
at that point, do you think you would keep your hand in the game and become a trainer, coach?
I've coached a little bit on the side when I'm in Lake Placid, and we have some of our younger programs. We're a small association, so we, for our younger programs, we just have one coach for 40, 50 kids. So I help when I can, and I certainly enjoy it, but I think when I retire from sport, I want to be in Maine full time. So I'm not sure that, the travel and being away from home at that point would be ideal, but I certainly will always stay involved with the sport when and where I can.
Now, when you see a 20-year-old teammate, do you ever say to that person, "You're doing that part wrong"?
Yeah, no.
Can you help yourself?
We actually work we have a great team atmosphere, particularly since we are an individual-based sport. A lot of sports that are also individual, they don't have that. And I think the reason is we all start at a young age, so we really grow up together. We're like a big family. So we're always helping each other, especially when we get to a new track, a foreign track, if I'm having trouble or someone's having trouble in a curve, we ask, what are you doing? How are you driving in? And there's a lot of feedback amongst the team as far as, getting ready for the weekend. When we race, we're racing for ourselves, but we are racing for Team USA, and we want our team to be successful.
Now, you have become a role model in another way. You've partnered with the Maine beer and wine distributors to teach responsibility. I
have. I've partnered with them for 4 years now as part of their community outreach. It really was perfect timing. I had just moved back to Maine, and I was looking for a way to be more involved in the community, especially with kids, but I didn't really know how to go about it. So it was really the perfect partnership because that's exactly what they were looking for. So through them, I've spoken to over 35 high schools, over 11,000 high school students, sharing my story, of my career. And really the points that I try to hit with kids are, how important it is to try new things. I tried the sport of luge randomly, and, look where it brought me. And so to have an open mind, and then, to set goals for yourself and be willing to work hard, and, really understand that every one of them has potential for greatness in whatever it is that they love to do. They just have to be willing to work hard to get there.
And it's not a bad message to teach early about responsibility and about discipline.
Yeah.
And that's a good message, for kids who have not yet faced their first beer.
Yeah.
But will someday. Learning early about the requirements for responsibility is pretty important.
Yeah, we want kids to be healthy. We want them to make good decisions for themselves. And I think they can't really hear it enough from different people in the community, how important it is for them to take care of themselves mentally and physically. And, understanding that choices you are making today, especially at the high school level, can follow you, down the road. So just to make sure you're making good decisions for yourself and putting your energy and time into the things that are most important.
If you've been listening to this whole episode of Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine, you're starting to figure out how Maine's Julia Clukey worked her way onto the world stage in the sport of luge. Partnering up with the Maine Beer and Wine Distributors Association, Julia has dedicated a lot of her personal time to pass these life lessons on to kids. She's even started a summer camp for girls. We'll let you know how to stay in touch with Julia Clukey in just a few moments. This is Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. Welcome back to Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine. Luge is a highly specialized sliding event in international competition, and only one Maine native has ever made it to the top. Olympian Julia Clukey is my guest. She competes across the globe in the winter, then partners in the spring with the Maine Beer and Wine Distributors Association to spread the life lessons she's learned while growing up a champion. She's got quite a story to tell.
Yeah, I like to think that I've live my life making good decisions. Part of that is just finding the sport of luge at such a young age, falling in love with something that made it easier for me to make good decisions for myself because I was so focused on luge and schooling and everything from a very young age. So there wasn't really time for much else.
Right.
But I just, and again, it goes back to my parents too, instilling those values in me that, the expectations they had for me as a person and individual. And, if I can reach a kid and make them realize that they have potential for greatness and make them go after their own dreams, like I'm going to say yes to that opportunity every time because it's rewarding. It's what I feel I've gotten from the state of Maine, and I want to give it back.
To some extent, you've got to squeeze all that in while the kids are still in school because you can't do it in summer.
Yeah. So the spring is, the time where I hit up the schools the most, high school and middle schools. To speak, I do a few in the fall before I leave, and then throughout the summer I have my summer camp for girls, which is 2 weeks, and then I visit some other rec programs and summer programs throughout the summer as well, but not as heavy as or not as busy as the school year.
You actually have a 10-day camp for girls?
It is. It's a 2-week camp for girls in partnership with the Kennebec Valley YMCA. This will be the 4th summer. It's for girls grades 4 through 8, and it focuses all on self-confidence, building self-esteem, understanding how to set goals for yourself, and not allowing not allowing yourself to be limited by stereotypes or, media influence on what you can and can't do as a girl. I think it's a really important message as a female athlete to, keep giving back, to make sure young girls are going after their dreams and feeling good about themselves mentally and physically.
I would think if I were a young girl, and obviously I can't picture this too accurately, but I would think if I walk into a room and Julia Clukey is there, I'd be saying, wow, I could be like her.
I don't know if it, this will be the 4th summer of camp, and I'll have a handful of campers, probably 15 or so, that have come every year. So it's going to be, both happy to see them again and also sad a little bit because this is likely their last year. They're getting aged out of the camp. So it's unique in that way. I've been able to see these girls change from year to year. And, throughout the school year, I send cards to the girls, at Christmas time, checking in, just reminding them to, set goals for themselves and keep working hard in school. So I try to be connected as I can to the kids that I reach, more than just, the day I meet them.
I presume that must cost something. I mean, for
the camp.
Kids, yeah, for the
yep.
camp.
So the camp is it's $350 for the 2 weeks, and that includes lunch and snacks and transportation from Augusta out to the camp. We bus from Augusta. There are scholarships available. Every year we give out about 40% of the kids come on full or partial scholarship, which is really important to me. Anything that I'm part of, I want to make sure it's accessible to all kids, regardless of their background. So, people can stop into the YMCA in Augusta and fill out an application, and don't let the cost hinder you from coming.
Good, so that's the way that people would get in touch with you to do the camp.
Yep, or through my website, clukeyluge.com/camp, or Clukey. Really, everything I do, my public speaking at schools, summer camp, about me as an athlete, is on clukeyluge.com.
So schools or teachers who want to get a hold of you to come and speak to the class, same thing.
But yep, that's the best way. There's a form right there that you fill out, and again, the program's completely free to schools. I've been all the way up to Aroostook County, all the way down to the southern tip, western, eastern. There really isn't anywhere I won't go. I'm happy to travel around the state and share my story with as many kids as possible.
Well, when we talk about your story, one of the things kids need to learn about responsibility and discipline and achieving their dreams is you're going to meet some adversity along the way, and you've faced some adversity. Yeah,
that's another big message, being prepared to overcome obstacles, that are going to happen. There's going to be situations that you might find yourself in, whether it's not studying for a test or something, and you have to, take responsibility for that and work hard to do better the next time. And then there's also, the challenges in life that you never see coming, whether it's, relocating or moving or losing a loved one, injuries if you're an athlete. And so, really just having kids, understand that those things can and will happen.
And they happen to you.
They have happened to me.
Yeah.
And, sharing how it is that I got over them, which is, having that community, family, having people that you trust, people that can help you, navigate tougher times. And then, really the same lessons apply, almost more so when things go tough. You have to set, better, goals for yourself and stick to a plan, and work through those tough times.
You have had to work through injuries. I recall one occasion where you practically went to the top of the track on crutches.
I did, yeah. So in 2009, the year of the 2010, the season of the 2010 games, I tore my meniscus right in my right knee a few weeks before the season started. So I had surgery. And yeah, I started off that season sliding. I'd crutch out to the start, take my run, and then crutch, up to the finish. Really, it was the only option. I wasn't going to miss the Olympics, or the opportunity to make the Olympic team for that. So, I was angry for a couple days that it happened, but then I knew I had to shift my energy to getting better and doing whatever it took to make sure that I was ready in time for the games.
You even had to battle through, I think, some kind of genetic condition that was a challenge for a while?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with Arnold-Chiari malformation, which is a congenital disorder, which involves the brainstem, sitting out a little bit, extended past the skull. So I had to have surgery for that in 2011. It was causing a lot of headaches and severe headaches. It was to the point where competing wasn't really an option for me. And it was about a year recovery from that of, healing from the surgery and then, getting back in shape as an athlete, back to where I needed to be to slide safely and compete where I wanted to. So that was certainly a challenging time for me, but, there's some things you can't change and, you could get angry about it and sulk, but at the end of the day, you have to try to get through them. And so, that goes back to the community and people I have in my life, helping me to move forward and, helping me through bad days to stay the course and
there's the lesson
not give
again.
Up. Yep.
Discipline and responsibility and working towards your dreams and overcoming obstacles.
Yep. That's really, I think anything in life, those 4 points can assist you in, whether it's school or athletics or career, being willing to do those things is going to, give you the best chance for success and ending up where you want to.
Well, I don't know if you've inspired the listeners of Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine, but I feel kind of inspired. I may even try the treadmill tomorrow.
Got to start somewhere.
And there she is, Julia Clukey, Maine native, Olympian, World Cup medalist in the sport of luge. If you want to keep up with her, the website is clukeyluge.com. My thanks again to the Maine Beer and Wine Distributors Association for the work they are doing with Julia to promote responsibility. Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine is brought to you by Hammond Lumber, Dysarts, EBS, Doors Equipment, and Napa Auto Parts. You can hear this show again or share the podcast with friends at 929theticket.com. Be sure to join me next week, Saturday morning at 9, Sunday morning at 8. This is Sports Radio 929 The Ticket.